Before I start the address today, I just want to say a few words about endings and beginnings. I'm not sure whether you felt like me in my life. Sometimes I've felt that my life has always been filled with beginnings and inevitable endings. We're all blessed with beginnings and faced with endings. And what we need to do is to remember that time that is in between, which can only bring comfort to our broken hearts and strength to our resolve to carry on. For me, I've never been good at saying goodbyes. Most of the emotion that goes with goodbyes comes, of course, from our life experiences, which bring tears to our eyes and trembles to our lips. Endings and goodbyes can only mean one thing, and that is the irreversible passing of time. So as we are swirling towards the ending of another year, let's embrace the in-between time that we have all shared together in this congregation of St. Michael's and not forgotten, hopefully. The ending will mean that we have survived another year. Maybe it was an easy one for some, a blessed one for others, or a challenging and unbearable one for other people. So here we are, almost at the entrance of a new year. I want to thank you all as a congregation for the in-between times that we've shared together, from the beginning in February this year and now the ending in December of 2019. Those in-between times of this year, which of course has provided us with so much interaction, discussion, and sometimes frustration. So I won't say goodbye, but rather adieu until next time. The stock cartoon appearing at the beginning of every year is that of an old man and a baby boy. They are the personification of time. The old man, Father Time, is pictured usually in a white robe, having a white beard and carrying a scythe. The infant wearing nothing but a ribbon across his body with the numbers of the new year on it. Points, of course, to the future, the new year lying ahead. Victor Borg once told a friend that he could always tell the time by his piano. His friend was absolutely incredulous, so Borg volunteered to demonstrate. So Borg pounded out a crashing march on the piano, and immediately there came a banging on the wall and a shrill voice screamed, "Stop that noise, don't you know it's 1:30 in the morning?" It goes without saying, of course, that time is at the heart of all that is important to human beings. In a dingy laboratory in Bonn, in Germany, lies a submarine-shaped metal cylinder. It's about 3 metres long and rests comfortably on a steel frame surrounded by wires and pipes and dials. At first glance, the entire contraption looks like the inside of a giant car engine. In fact, it is a clock, or rather, the clock. The Bonn device and a network of similar instruments across the world together constitute the standard clock. The individual instruments, of which the German model is currently the most accurate, are cesium beam atomic clocks. They are continually monitored, compared, refined via radio signals from satellites and TV stations to make sure that they are in perfect step. Indeed, in 2006, we had an extra second added to the year as the atomic clock was adjusted to Earth's rotation. On September the 2nd, 1752, 6.5 million Britons went to bed, only to wake up in the next morning with September the 14th. The reason? The Calendar Act of 1750 by the British Parliament. The 11 lost days of September 1752 occurred when Britain suddenly changed from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, bringing it in line with most of Europe. Now, of course, they want to get out of Europe, so who knows what's going to happen. The Gregorian calendar is today's international calendar, named after the man who introduced it in February 1582, Pope Gregory XIII. Before 1752, Britain and her empire followed the Julian calendar, introduced, of course, by Julius Caesar in 46 BCE. However, this calendar had an inbuilt error of 1 day every 128 years, due to a miscalculation of the solar year by 11 minutes. There were cries from the population that they would die earlier because they'd lost 11 days. There were some landlords charged the full month's rent, even though the month was 11 days short. It wasn't Britain who held out to the last. Russia didn't change over until 1918. Greece and Turkey changed over in 1923. By then, the synchronisation had become so bad that the two countries needed to skip 13 days rather than 11. Time, of course, is always relative. All clocks were invented, of course, to tell the time for entirely human purposes. But we know that not all humans are on the same time. Even in Australia at this time of the year, we have 5 time zones. And in our everyday lives, we feel the pressure of time. And it is the pace of life that gives rise to that sense of scarcity of time. We even talk today, don't we, about being time poor. And many politicians and professional people often retire from their activities to spend more time with their families. In December 1965, an American rock band called the Byrds released a song called Turn, Turn, Turn. To everything there is a season. And the words were taken straight out of that reading from Ecclesiastes that Graham brought us this morning. It was a commercial success, peaking at number 17 on the US charts and number 11 in the UK. Along with their song Mr. Tambourine Man and Turn, 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 it established the Byrds as one of rock music's most creative forces, on a par with the Beatles, the Beach Boys and the Rolling Stones. In our reading then today from the book of Ecclesiastes, whoever wrote this, some scholars think it was Solomon, others are not so sure, but the writer says all aspects of our life have their appropriate times. Some of these times come only once in a lifetime. Others will reoccur again and again. So it is important to recognise when something is having its appropriate time and to allow the full interval of time for it. The Hebrew translation of that phrase, there is a time for everything, is more accurately translated as everything is under inexorable law. The wise person knows that just as there is the shiny side of life, inexorably there will be the inevitability of its shadow. The purpose of the writer, of course, was to contend that there is nothing under the sun that is capable of giving meaning to our human lives. Even if some level of fulfillment or self-satisfaction were achieved, death, of course, is waiting at the end. Frustration and adversity are unavoidable, and answers to the hard questions of life are not forthcoming. And on these terms, Ecclesiastes confronts the crookedness and the uncertainty of life and shows, probably unconsciously, the need for a concept of new life to bring harmony out of the discord of reality. Continuing his philosophical reflection on the nature of life under the sun, the writer notices that the natural rhythm of life includes birth and death, killing and healing, tearing down and building, weeping and laughing, mourning and dancing, accepting and letting go, loving and hating, silence and speaking, and so on. He seems to be saying that such things are the normal lot of human beings, whether they are righteous or unrighteous. He is simply describing life as it is. Life arcs back and forth. Nothing stays put. And because of this, we should hold things loosely. Efforts to bring about permanence are frustrating and fruitless. And in the end, if seen from a human perspective, all of these things appear to be meaningless. And yet in chapter 2, the writer says, "There is nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in their toil." So, of course, it's better to have joy and pleasure rather than the opposite. One of the main themes of this book is that the course of life to be pursued is a God-centered life. The pleasures of life are not intrinsically fulfilling and cannot offer lasting satisfaction, but they can be enjoyed as gifts from God. In chapter 7 we read, "When times are good, be happy, but when times are bad, consider this: God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, no one can discover anything about their future." Adversity may not be enjoyable, but it can help us to become the people of faith that we ought to be. So after reciting all the good and bad times of our lives, the writer asks this question: what gain have the workers from their toil? So much of our time is taken up with the toil and the tasks of life, and the best that we can do is to enjoy the present, not to trouble ourselves with speculation and ultimate purpose of our toil in the coming year. The writer says that amassing wealth and possessions is foolish because we cannot take them with us. And instead of placing our hope in anything under the sun, he urges us to trust in its creator. And how does that improve our lives? It provides a present philosophy of life that frees us from worry and fretting. And because God has set eternity in a person's heart, we can look forward to a time when temporary things will be forgotten. And someday, according to the writer, God's purposes, which seem to make no sense now, will be understood. So as we come to the end of this another year and look hopefully into the new year, is there despair or wisdom in this book? For this congregation of St. Michael's, there have been times of despair throughout this year. Uncertainty, doubt in the processes of the uniting church, which seem to take forever to bring to bear. There have been times of disagreement and times of unity. However, you are now at a time of hope as you enter into this new year. Some biblical scholars have questioned why Ecclesiastes is in the canon of Scripture, because it seems to be so despairing of life. Even Martin Luther believed that it should not be in the Bible. We live in a society of achievement and acquisition. We are ambitious, constantly making plans, setting goals, striving and moving forward. But where does it lead, is the question. Our goals, our dreams, our objectives are often striving after the wind, the writer says. And according to the writer of Ecclesiastes, we are invited to live each day, not seeking results, but rather enjoying the process of our toil. Carmen Bernos de Gasolds is an Italian nun, and she wrote this prayer called the Prayer of the Ox. I offer it to you as I conclude today. Dear God, give me time. People are always so driven. Make them understand that I can never hurry. Give me time to eat. Give me time to plod. Give me time to sleep. Give me time to think. Amen. Our blessing. Today go forth filled with the nourishing love of a God to act and risk all for the good of the world. And may our hearts be filled with the glory of the divine Spirit, our minds be refreshed by the wonder of the Christ, and our bodies be lifted up as we follow in the leading of the eternal Spirit. Amen. Let us join in singing our recessional hymn, O Thou Who Camest from Above.